Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Benjamin Matthew, your host for MART's webinar on impact of rural demand post-COVID with reverse migration as a key issue. As a format of the webinar, we will go by in the following manner. We will first have a primary study, which we will be presented by one of the panelists on the board. Followed by, we have about three eminent panelists on board who will speak from their own experiences and connect to their presentation and the study information as they seem pleased. Followed by a question answer session towards the end of it. We have about 15-20 minutes of question answer session towards the end. And doing all this would be our none other than the father of rural marketing, Mr. Pradeep Kashyap. He will be moderating this session. For your information, all the webinar people, all the attendees will be in the listen only mode. And I would like to hand over the mic to Mr. Kashyap for starting the session.
Thank you very much, Ben, and a very good morning to all of you. I mean, there are about 450 registrations, so I imagine there'll be a large number of people attending this event. I am not coming in the capacity of an expert, but I would just like to share a few thoughts. You know, to me, this could be India's historic moment in many ways. For the last 70 years, we've been talking about rural development and how to bring and how to integrate the villages with towns and then with the cities. But we've not been able to do it simply because the level of migration has been going up and up. It's for the first time that we are talking of a reverse migration. Nobody has the exact numbers, but out of the total 120 million migrants, it is said that possibly 20 million have come back for the time being to their own villages. Now, how many of these will stay back? How many will go back in search of work in their own states or in other states? That's something that will unfold over the next few weeks and months. But it is certain that a certain portion will stay back. And the ones who do, and this will come out in the study also which Pankaj makes, and the ones who do, the question we have to ask is, will they help to boost the economy with their efforts, or will they become a drain on the rural economy, and then you'll have to give them more dole and more narega and the rest of it. You know, if you look back at history, in 1978, when China opened its economy, as you know, they had very large PSUs. And these PSUs had the latest equipment, the latest machines, CNC, numerical controlled machines. But one of the first things they did was to dismantle the public sector undertaking, because these were, you know, bottomless pits in which money was pumped in and nothing would come out. They were making losses and losses. And these skilled workers had to go back to their villages. And when they went back to their villages, they had nothing to do, so they started using their high-level skills to start making components for discrete components for different kinds of products. And what followed from there is something that was then organized by the Chinese government, which is called the TVEs, the Town and Village Enterprises. The concept was that people in the villages who had high skills, you know, who had returned to the villages, they would make these discrete components, and these were then sent to the district towns, equivalent of our district towns, and there the sub-assemblies would take place, and finally the sub-assemblies were shipped to the big cities, where they finished the assembly, the final product was made, they branded it, they tested it, they packaged it, and they marketed the product. Now, through those TVEs, China could pull out, according to them, 400 million people out of poverty. So the number may not have been 400 million, it may have been lower, but the fact is they could pull out a large number. Now, the problem with the thinking in our country on rural development, and I've been involved with rural development as a marketing advisor to the Ministry of Rural Development. I've been involved at least for 30 years in this field now. What I find is that our approach has been very piecemeal. So you have an LPG program, you have some other program, but we don't have an integrated program. And more importantly, we don't have a vision for rural India. What would we like to see 10 years from now? So I think this could be that historic moment where, with pressures building up, with millions of people staying back, will we just again give them dole through Narega and additional budget for Narega? Or will we start looking for a holistic model? And some of you may remember that in the 70s and 80s, we had a program in rural development called the Integrated Rural Development Program. The program was very high sounding, but since I was involved in it, it actually again turned out to be a dole program where, the beneficiaries were given 15,000 rupees to start a business which nobody could do. So it didn't really work. So will we rise to the occasion this time is something that we have to see. Now, the other interesting fact which we haven't cashed in on is that we have about 600,000 villages and we have about 8,000 towns. So there are about 70 to 80 villages around each town. So you have a natural hub and spoke model, right? Because we talk of a hub and spoke model in distribution and marketing, like Coke and Pepsi and all these people. They supply to a hub and then it gets distributed down the line. So you have a natural hub and spoke model, but we have, and with the quality of roads having improved significantly, we have the opportunity to integrate this model in a more definite way, for which my suggestion to the government would be that instead of talking about smart cities, which is a program which hasn't really worked very well because with small amounts of money, you can't transform a city. But we should be talking about a smart towns program. And here I'm talking of towns with populations between 50,000 and 5 lakhs. There are about 500 towns. So if we could focus on these towns and create the common facilities. So what you call the common service centers. So for example, the tool room, or a common electroplating unit and things like that, where the small MSMEs can't invest that kind of money individually, but it could be done collectively. The other opportunity, why I say this is a historic moment, is that ours is the most informal economy in the world. 93% of our people are engaged in the informal economy, and only 7% of our workforce is in the formal sector, who are on a regular salary plus benefits. So will we now take that opportunity to try and formalize more and more of our workforce, because we have experienced the problems with an informal economy where big companies hire labor on a contract basis without giving them any benefits. And the minute there is a lockdown or there are problems, they have backed out and they have not really looked after these people. So can we talk of more formalization of the economy? And here, the tragedy is that you have a ministry for everything, and Dr. Amar Patnaik, who's from the Rajya Sabha, would vouch for that we have ministries for everything. We have a ministry for tribal affairs, right? But we don't have a ministry for migrants. And you know that the largest employer in rural India is, of course, agriculture. Within agriculture, there are about 110 million farmers. So these are the self-employed owners of their farms, and another 110 to 120 million migrant, 120 million labor force on farms. Right? Now, here is the number of migrants is also 120 million. So in a way, the migrants constitute the single largest component of the workforce, but we don't have a voice for them. So, will we look at something around that? So, so that's why I feel that this is a very important seminar, and we've got very eminent panelists for you, and they will of course share some very useful ideas. We'll have to see how we can take this forward, and perhaps MART as an organization can put together all the thoughts that are generated here, and we could put together a white paper, and this could be then widely circulated. And let us see if something significant comes out of it, and can we, the 450 people here, be a part of this history. So with these opening comments, I just wanted to set the larger context. So with these few words, I will now invite Mr. Pankaj Mishra, who is a partner at MART and also the head of research and consumer insights. He and his team have put together a study, which is a primary study, where they have gone around, or at least on phone, and they have talked to a number of people. And he will be sharing some of the very interesting insights and findings, and then how we could use these to find solutions to this problem, which can be, how it can be converted into an opportunity. So over to you, Pankaj.
No, yeah, good morning to all of you. I think it's my privilege to share the findings of the study that MART has conducted. I think for last 3 decades, MART has been at the forefront of knowledge sharing and knowledge creation in the rural domain with the leadership of Father of Rural Marketing, Mr. Pradeep Kashyap. In the same spirit, we have internally conducted a pan-India survey with the migrant workers to understand and to find answers to some of the questions which are giving sleepless nights to the corporates and all other sectors, that what is the next step of the migrants, how they are going to behave in the post-COVID scenario. So to find answers to these questions, we have conducted this study that I'm going to share with you. Let me share my screen first. And, yeah. Can you all see the screen?
No.
No.
It takes a little time to come.
Yeah. Now it is. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So as I explained to you earlier that this was the study which was planned and done by MART, keeping in mind that how can we answer the key questions which everybody is facing today, and they need answers because they want to plan their next strategy in post-COVID scenario. So as you all are aware that Indian migration wave is perhaps the world's largest migration population, and with largest voluntary stream of migration, both in terms of the numbers and also in terms of the distances they travel. And perhaps this 120 million migrant worker is equivalent to the population of the countries like Japan or Bangladesh or Pakistan, the total population. That is the kind of numbers you can visualize, that how much movement we have in the migration. And the larger focus, the migration corridors are basically the so-called the Bimaru states of India. I should not use those words, but I think the UP, Bihar, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh constitute, including Odisha, more than 50% of this migrant population, which moves out to the southern and western states and some of the rich northern states like Delhi and Haryana, Punjab. But it is the major chunk of major population which takes this kind of long distance migrations and short distance migration in search of livelihoods, because there is a distance migration, lack of opportunities in those states, although the governments are working constantly to build those, but this is the situation as on date. And that is the reason why we see that 1 out of 4 person working in any town or city is a migrant worker today. So out of 497 millions, 120 are the migrant population, and they are largely employed in the unorganized sectors like construction, domestic help, textile and handloom industries, bricklaying work, as agriculture labor. So these are the major employers of these workers. But what we see in the post-COVID scenario, we have seen the largest reverse migration of the population in the history, exceeding even the partition population, which was around 20 million. So already we have reverse migration has been to the tune of 25 million till date. I am quoting from the figures from the different magazines and websites. Please correct me if there is any mistakes in those. So that is the situation we are in today. So what we are trying to address here, we want to explore answers to these million-dollar questions, that how these migrants are going to behave post-COVID, whether these migrants are going to come back. If yes, then by what time they will come back, so that the industry could plan, the sectors could plan their activities as the unlock is already started in many of the states. Second question is that how it is going to impact the rural demand. As we see, a lot of this 25 million have gone back to their native places, largely coming from the villages. So how it is going to do the play the dynamics in the post-COVID scenario if they stay back. And thirdly, that whether government's COVID package recently announced 20 lakh crore and then additional 20,000 crore for the MSME package. So how all this is going to provide any kind of help or support the migrant worker. So to find answers to these questions, we have gone to the corridors of migration corridors of India. So we have covered the states like UP, Bihar, Odisha and Madhya Pradesh primarily. And we have taken the actual data of these migrants, collected the data. We have spoken to the people who have actually gone back, the people who have settled back, gone to their native places, and now they're in a good frame of mind to talk and discuss. So mostly in the post-quarantine situation, we have spoken to these people so that they should be in good state of mind to discuss and talk about. They should not have a lot of baggage of their migration challenges. So we have spoken to them around 15 to 20 minutes on telephone and collected the information to understand answers to these questions. So what we have seen that these migrants have returned from all over the country to these states. So largely it was from Maharashtra and Gujarat and some southern states. Even Delhi corridor was quite strong in terms of the out-migration population. So these were the primary places from where these workers have come. So let's first talk about the journey of migration. So before we get into the details of the findings, it is very important to understand that who they are, why people migrate, and what kind of distances they travel for the work. So it's very striking. Many of you may not be knowing that this migration is happening both for the gainful employment, like for more work or for better job opportunities, which constitute around more than 60% of the migration. And another 25% to 30% is because of the distress. Because in these states, poorer states, there are limited opportunities because of the absence of the industries and other services sector. People have no choice but to go out for work. And when it comes to no choice, then they have no choice even for the distance. So if you see on the right-hand side, as many as half of the population is traveling more than 1,000 kilometers. That means they are going to states like Gujarat or Maharashtra or even further south, down south, in search of work. For 10,000, 15,000 rupees, even for 5,000 rupees, they are traveling long distances. As per the data of railways, the migration numbers are also tallying with those long distance migration. And in addition to that, the second set of people who migrate are actually the population which is around 1/4. So they are actually going for a medium distance migration, and the migration distances are as high as 36% population. So they are going for 500 plus distance. Very few people, only 2 out of 10 are actually going for short distance migration. So then, so what you see on the TV visuals or the what you read in the newspaper, the long distance migration is playing havoc because of the long distances, lack of transportation to come back. And that's what you see the reality on the ground because of this migrant population situation. Now trying to understand that what kind of migration is taking place. So what we see that the migration for long term as well as short term is almost equivalent. So mostly the skilled workers are going for long term migrations, and on an average they have been staying there for 5 years or more time in those places. So they basically, the difference is that long term migrants generally relocate themselves to those locations. Mostly they are going without families. Almost we found in the study that 75% come as single because some relative or some person from their village is staying and they call them for the work. So that is how the migration starts. And basically they spend good time without family in the initial years. Once they start getting good incomes, then probably they start calling their families there. But lastly, it is just single male workers are mostly migrating. On the other hand, the short-term migration is generally happening for 5 to 6 months. And this is basically constituted by the non-skilled workers, the farm laborers and other daily wage workers like the construction workers, masons. They are constituting the right-hand side of this purple pie. We are the short-term migrants. And in the study, we covered the equal number of skilled and unskilled, which will give you a better picture of individuals' migration situation. And on the right-hand side, what you see that majority of them as expected, are actually employed as casual workers. So they have no job guarantee, they have no any job security, and only the workers who are into factories and some other sectors like the textiles and some factories, they give them kind of guaranteed employment. Although it is not a paper guarantee, but since they say that they have been working at those shops or those places for last 5-7 years, so they assume that they are permanent or a contractual kind of employees, although there is no formal contract because of the very weak labor laws in India. Now trying to understand that who are the people, what is the profile of these people whom we have covered in the study. So what you see, it's a good mix of skilled as well as non-skilled workers. So the people are basically working in the unorganized sector, who are the masons or tailors, electricians, plumbers or drivers or the factory workers who come as a skilled worker. So both the yellow bars and the green bars are talking about that skilled worker segment, and the unskilled worker basically constituted by the construction workers who are the laborers at the construction sites, or the people who are the farm laborers. They are the major constituent of the unskilled population which are into the migration. Now let's understand that how much they earn and how much actually they send back to the family. So it's very interesting to note that on an average, the earning of the migrants is around 11,000, although the unskilled are on average earning 7,000, whereas the skilled are earning 12,500 rupees per month. But very interesting to see that almost 50% of that money goes back to home. So it's very important to note for the policymakers that a lot of families back home are depend on this remittance money. So 50% of the GDP of these workers, 50% of the income actually is going back to the villages, and which is also adding to the rural incomes and the rural consumption scenario. And how it is going to interplay post-COVID is a very important thing to note in the coming slides. So now let's try to impact coming to the COVID subject, that when we talk to them and try to understand that why they are going back. So basically we hear a lot of news from different channels of why they are going back. But to listen from the horse's mouth, we have spoken to them and talked to them. So what is very interesting to note here, that the fear of corona was paramount for many migrations. It is not actually the loss of the job, but it is the fear which was playing a bigger role in terms of this distress migration back to the home. But in addition to that, as many as 42% are either not getting the money because the employer has stopped giving the money, or they were told that to go back, and उनको मालिक ने बोला कि आप वापस जाओ, जब फैक्ट्री खुलेगी, जब दुकान खुलेगी तब वापस आना. So in a way they were also in a situation that they are not going to have any money. So how to survive with limited money, because जो भी बचता है वो तो हम घर भेज देते हैं, तो where is money to survive? So they had no choice because no savings were left, and also some of the almost 25% of migrants also told that they did not get the money. 75% got the money from their employers, but 25% didn't get the money from the employers. So that was also one of the reasons quoted by the some respondent for going back to home, because they had no means to survive in the cities because of these problems. So these are the major reasons coming in terms of the why they migrated. And once they gone back, so next question we try to understand that how you are meeting the expenses. So what is your coping strategy at this point of time when you are in the village and lockdown is still continuing? So how you are meeting those expenses? So many of the skilled workers who had some savings, they were meeting the expenses mostly from their savings. Some were getting 20%, were also getting the family support for meeting this crisis. But very important to note that as many as 2 out of 10 also got the Narega work. So definitely whatever government is trying to do on the ground seems to be working as per the reflection from these slides. And plus some of the workers who had some small land back home also tried to get some money from the land, or also borrowed some money from the money lenders. So that was the coping mechanism in the interim period that they are trying to use. But on the right hand side, it is very important to note that the ration card and the Aadhaar card has come as a big savior for these people. Many migrants who are not even having the ration card in their destination places could get the necessary 5 kg of rice or wheat plus some pulses for the survival. And many reported that they had 2 ration cards in the home, so they got double ration. So, so they were quite satisfied with those kind of support mechanism. In addition to that, the Ujjwala Yojana has also been reported by many migrants that they have got free का cylinder मिला है मुझे 1 महीने 2 महीने के लिए 3 महीने मिलेगा. So that was also reflected on the ground. So these 3 schemes were well quoted that they have been very savior in these tough times for the migrants. So now moving forward, so coming to the key question and the $1 million question, that what is going to be how the future is going to look like for the migrants. So this is how the future is crystal gazing looks like for us, that it's the very starting fact that the majority are going to return. So that's a big relieving news for the industry and for all the stakeholders in industry and services, that as many as 56% migrants are going to come back to their earlier place of work. So, and many of them also told कि already they have been receiving calls कि मेरे मालिक का phone आ रहा है कि आप वापस आ जाओ. अब जैसे ही lockdown खुलता है, you should come back, you should join the work. So they were getting very positive vibes from their employers, that they are recalling them, and as the unlock has already started happening in many pockets of the country. So that is a positive news which is coming through. Although this study was done just before the like on 18 to 20th of this month, last month, between 18 to 20th of May, when we conducted this study. So even that point of time, many were getting these kind of calls from their employers. So they are willing to go back. We will talk that why they are willing to go back in the coming slide. But the important thing to notice are the 2 other bars, the green and purple one, that as many as 1 out of 4 is going to stay back in the village. So that is a very positive sign for the rural marketers, for the people who want to create demand in the rural. But at the same time, it has a point of caution for the industries and for the sectors who are expecting them to come back. So it is looking clear that they are not going to be in a hurry to come back, and they are mentally preparing themselves to stay back for a longer period. There is another set of population, that another 19%, who are saying that they will not go back to the earlier place. However, they are willing to go for a short distance migration. So they are willing to relocate themselves in the nearby town cities, because they are sick, they have come back with the skilled. So they think that now they could find work for their skill and they can try to get something less than the cities, but maybe better than the village remuneration for the livelihood. And another angle to look at, we look at this data from the distance perspective also. So when we ask the people that how far they are going to travel, so people who are returning back and also the people who are staying back, so we try to understand that how much distance they have been traveling for the migration or doing that. So what we found here, that the people who have gone to the maximum distances. So if you look at the, try to understand this graph, that at the bottom we have the people with the 1,000-kilometer plus travel. So there only 50% are saying that they are going to go back to their place, earlier places, and 50% of them are either going to stay back in the village or migrate to the nearby places. Whereas the people who had short distance migration within 500 kilometers, maybe you say, for example, from Agra to Delhi, majority of them are going to come back to the earlier place of work, and very few of them are going to stay back. So that is another important take from this slide, that the tendency of migration in future is going to be more short distance than the longer distances, because they have seen the challenges and vagaries of the reverse migration. Perhaps that is also on the mind, but the thing is that they are probably thinking that they can get the trade-off between the distance and the money is better settled with the shorter migration than the longer migration. The take maybe from this slide. Now try to understand that what is going to happen, that the piece of 1/4 population. So what is going to happen with the 25%? Who are they? So they are basically the unskilled lot. So you can see the farm laborers who are 40% into that, and the daily wage earners, which constitute the largely the unskilled population who are into construction sites and other places like loaders, transporters. So they are the major constituent who are saying that they are going to stay back in the villages, and they will try to find work in Narega or the work in the farms and other avenues, but they are not going to return in majority of the cases. Whereas the skilled workers and factory workers have low inclination to stay back in the villages compared to the non-skilled one. And when we ask that what they are going to do, what they are going to do in the hope to do in the future, and how much they are expecting to earn. So asking this question, majority of them are saying that they will be either getting into agriculture work, or some of them, interesting to note the second part, that the people, as many of the studies are saying, that people have come with the new skills back in the villages. So they are trying to become self-employed, get into self-employment, and they want to start on their own. They want to come on their own. So the spirit of entrepreneurship is now coming up, which we have been hoping since long in the rural. And this is a good take for government to optimize on this skill through self-help groups, through other initiatives, how this skilled workers can be engaged meaningfully. Government is taking the Narega work and other things which are more engaging the unskilled population. But this is a new ray of hope for the government, that how they can engage this skilled population which is now willing to stay back. And they are seeing a future in the villages in the coming times. And in that case, currently they are expecting to earn only roughly 6,500, which is equal to the remittances they are sending back to their homes. So, but now with the support from the government, with the drivers, we are expecting this number will move up and they will be earning better and better. And somewhere they could be halfway between what they were earning in past and what they are expecting right now. So another important drivers. So now let's look at the drivers which government has been pumping in the last 70 days of post-COVID. So this additional 40,000 crores for Narega fund is definitely going to create more mandates for this migrant, especially the unskilled workers who are more inclined to take those work for their survival. And the second important aspect to talk about is the agriculture reforms. So as many are talking about these reforms announced by government are like the 1991 economic reforms. So what we say that farm gate infra development in terms of the cold chains, in terms of the warehousing, where government is trying to open up the sector for the private players by downgrading or by cutting the entry barriers, encouraging the barrier-free trade for the farmers for interstate trading of commodities. This is all going to create the better farm income, and ultimately it will give more employment to these migrants in the villages. So that is the second important factor we foresee that is going to play a big role in terms of building incomes. And last but not the least is the collateral-free loans and the Mudra Sishu loans, 50,000 plus loans that government has announced. This is going to give good support to these people who are trying to put their skill in the village, be it the electricians or plumbers or other people who want to be on their own in the villages and would need little fund to do these kind of activities, to buy some tools, to do those works in a better way, how they are doing in the cities. Because now they have learned the skills to manage tools, to bring a little more automation in their work. So this kind of support will be very much savior for them, and which will actually protect and retain them in the villages. If we don't do these things, I fear that they have no choice but again to go back to their earlier places, which they don't want to do right now. So what the implications it is going to have, what we clearly see that it is going to, first of all, create the growth, create the rural incomes, new rural incomes in terms of self-employment and from the NREGA support. It is going to also bring a lot of mechanization in the destination places. So like this 25% people who are not going to go back, and we see that 40% are the farm laborers who are working in Maharashtra, Gujarat and down south in the farms. Now when they are not going to come back, so the agri companies, especially the tractor and implement companies, can see a big opportunity of creating the innovative mechanization tools. Because what you see today, farm laborers are either doing the sowing or the harvesting work by and large. So this is a good opportunity for the agri machinery industry to create innovative machines and tools which are affordable for the farmers, both of small and medium scale, and they will get a rapid adoption, because it is very clear that at least for the next season of cropping, these workers are not going to come back, and they are going to suffer if they are not going to get the right implements and right machinery to harvest the crop, or they don't get the right things to sow the crop. So these are the major opportunity areas for those companies to focus upon. And thirdly, it is the growth in the rural consumption. So the demand for two-wheelers, for the FMCG and the other FMCG categories is going to grow as this population is going to stay back, and some new income is going to be created in the villages. And since the post-COVID scenario also looks that people will go for more of a personal transport choice, so we see a demand of two-wheelers, and other four-wheelers also might be rising in the coming times. And last point to note that dissemination of new skills, the migrants who have come back with new skills are going to disseminate this skill to other unskilled population, and that is also going to be creating the new employment, and the government dream of skilling India can get a good leap of faith from this kind of trend behavior that we are predicting to come. Now moving to the next set of people, the 56% who are returning back to the earlier place. Who are they? So here we see that a good relief is that most of the skilled workers, be the 30% of wage earners or the factory workers, they are going to come back. So 60%, these people, majority of this segment is going to come back to the cities, back to the work. So this will minimize the planning for the corporates in terms of. Hello?
Pankaj, I'll have to request you to try and close because it's taken time. Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, sir. I will, yeah.
No, go ahead.
This is what is. Yeah. So what is going to happen with this event? They are going to return for more money. They are going to return within maximum will run immediately or within 3 to 6 months. So we are expecting that majority of them will be back within 6 months. And they are going to get support from the MSME packages for job creation, collateral-free loans, and the rental housing scheme that government is announcing for the migrants. And it is help in the partial restoration of the workforce, more in the organized sector. It will also create an automation need for the industry to meet the shortfall, and the employers will get the reinstatement of this migrant workers. So migrants are going to get back their money and their incomes because of this returning of the migrants. And the third segment, which is the who are going to migrate to the nearby location, they are largely the skilled people who are going to migrate in the nearby cities. And this is going to create kind of a new opportunities in the small towns in terms of better availability of the workforce, which is more skilled, and it will provide the support for more industrialization in the small towns because of this availability. And also it will create a scope for integration of the small town and rural in a hub and spoke model. So just to summarize what we are saying, that this will lead to the partial restoration of the workforce in the industry within 6 months, but now automation will also be needed for the meeting the shortfall in the long term. But there would be definitely the increase in the rural income, which will drive the consumption growth, and the small towns will emerge as a hub, which will be a win-win scenario for a small town and the rural economy. And as rightly said by Kashyap sir, that government need to initiate the small town initiative to projects in these 50,000 to 5 lakh population of 500 such locations, so that this decentralization of the economy and the larger dream of Abdul Kalam and Mahatma Gandhi can be met through this kind of approach. Thanks a lot for your time listening. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much, Pankaj, for a very detailed presentation. I mean, you did exceed your time, but I just felt that there was so much information you had with you that it would have benefited the people, and also the kind of comments that have been coming, which I've been reading right through, shows a lot of interest amongst the participants to discuss this more and to learn more about it. So thank you very much. May I now invite Dr. Amar Patnaik, who's a member of parliament in the Rajya Sabha. He retired from the IANAS service and was formerly the Principal Accountant General of Odisha, Sikkim, West Bengal, and Kerala. So over to you, Dr. Patnaik.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Kashyap, and thank you, Pankaj. Thank you, everybody. In the last, thanks to the lockdown during the last fortnight, this is the second presentation on migrant laborers that I'm listening to. One was organized by the PRS with about 26 MPs, and that was delivered by one professor who works exclusively on migration in IIM Ahmedabad, Chinmay Tumbe.
Yeah.
He is a member of the national, our country's migration working group. Now the point is, since the details, I must also tell Pankaj that while designing your questionnaire, Mr. Ramesh Jena also had spoken to me, so I had given my 2 bits on the questionnaire as well. I have a few, since you're very, very detailed, and I think we're running short of time, I have a few concerns and few questions. The intra-state migration within the state itself and out-state migration. Now, you would be surprised to know that out of the 120 or 130 million that you're talking about, the intra-state migration is substantial within the state itself. So, a lot of what you are saying probably doesn't apply to them. Then the second aspect, I'm just raising a few issues. I'm not really making a discourse. Second is this, places like Kerala, places like Punjab. I was posted in Kerala principally, so I know the out migration from that country or from that state is not because they're poor, not because there are opportunities. So Mr. Tumbe talks about the density of population in the area. So in coastal Odisha, a lot of migration which is taking place is because of, or in West Bengal, is because of the density of population, which also translates in a way you can say to the lack of opportunities, but not necessarily poverty levels. The third aspect is, in Odisha, huge number of people go from one particular area called Ganjam to Surat. The entire Surat's textile handloom industry is from these people. Now that's not because of anything. It is simply because of a historical connection. You go there and he's calling families. So many of them are permanently settled there. And another interesting thing, which probably could be factored into your data, which says that 56% want to return back, is also because of the fact, which I never knew, in fact, I learned it later, is that generally these permanent migrants who are not seasonal, they return home during this rainy season, during the month of June for various kinds of things. Only thing that has happened this time, it has become a little bit earlier than the usual time. So that may be the reason why they've come early, a little bit early, but then they'll go back around. The third point is this temporary mismatch between demand and supply of labor in the destination and in the parent state could alter significantly by giving signals relating to increase in wages, or hum aapko ghar de denge, because now ministry has announced that particular thing, which I think is the single most, because I was handling the movement of migrations from those places to my state during this crisis period, from the party and from the government. I was trying to pitch in a way because I had served in many of those states myself. So I found that the initial, the stoppage of the train itself gave them a sense of the distance. Otherwise, when the communication, if it would have remained, the sense of distance would have been lost. I mean, they wouldn't have really probably failed back. They are just coming in a little early and they'll go back. And if you give a signal of higher wages or a dormitory kind of accommodation, or you are giving a formal contract, or you are luring, as today I read some contractors in Hyderabad have invited their laborers to come back by flight ticket from Jharkhand. The things again will alter. So the study that we have done and the figures that we have generated, the responses that we have got as perceptions may not really hold in the longer run. Having said so, the point is that yes, some people would still be probably staying back, and they would be contributing or not contributing, as Mr. Kashyap said, in some way. But I fully agree with Mr. Kashyap's assertion that we should have been having a Ministry of Migration. The very fact that we are just not cognizant of this huge population and their contribution to the economy until this crisis. If the migrant people from Odisha do not go to Gujarat, in spite of all the mechanization, their handloom sector and their gems and jewelry cutting and textile sector will go for a 6. So this is, I fully agree. And the act that we had of the migrant laborers 1979, it is just not delivered. So a lot of work has to be done on the migrant issue. We have to get them formalized. We have to give them the social, economic, health benefits, including one country, one ration, that is a ration, at the place where they are. Because ultimately we have to think about the bigger country. Wherever there are opportunities, they will always go. I know, for example, the person who was working with me as a household help in Kerala, he had come from Bengal. He had come back. He had come simply because of the fact that he was being paid higher in Kerala, which is what you said. They are paid higher wages. So even if I got him back to Bhubaneswar and I returned, where he was not getting that much, and in terms of net, maybe he would be probably not saving as much. He still wanted to go back, and he went back because they go and stay in very kind of smaller conditions to save more money and send it here. Now, your calculation of 6,900, that was the remittance earlier, and if they start working now, they will get this 6,900. In terms of aggregate, it might be higher, but look at the per capita. I think if you look at the per capita income, it would still be lower if they start working here. So there will always be a kind of a urge for them, to go out once again in search of a better job. And if the prices and the labor, you see already I told you this is a great day, I must say. I tweeted on this that for the first time, the capital is worried about labor. Otherwise, the capital used to take everybody for granted, as if that was the only factor of production for making production possible. Now you see, you may have the capital, you have all the liquidity being infused in the MSME sector by the government and guaranteed and everything, but the finance minister herself said that people have got the loan sanctioned, but they're not disbursed. simply because of this fact. They can't start production unless this labor comes back. So this mismatch is there. So the aggregate income, the per capita income may go down. But one thing is that I think two significant things I wanted to say, that female labor force participation, this is a great opportunity to organize them into self-help groups and get them linked to micro enterprises and give them a marketing support. From the the PDS system, the masks that they made, we have for the first time realized the power of this particular group, which was not participating in the labor force, and even if it was participating, it was so informal and unorganized that it was probably not getting into the account of the contribution to the GDP. You take China, you take any other country, the female labor force is very high. I have written about this the other day in the Economic Times. The second aspect is the farm labor, agricultural labor. I have a gut feeling that if we don't handle this crisis and if we keep on continuing to do Narega, and I have insisted, and most governments would probably do and have already done, to include agricultural labor as a part of the Narega so that they will be eligible, because that's the only thing available. Keynesian kind of a push that everybody is given work, something or the other, and you get some income in your hand so that the demand goes up. But it should lead to disguised unemployment more. It should increase the level of disguise in the unemployment. So unless we, and some of this, as you have given, some of these people used to go to the other states during the time of harvesting for agricultural labor. I think it will continue even though there might be more mechanization. So for them, we need to have, I think, schemes which use the IRDP was good, but there was a problem that, there's a story. When it has become individual oriented and not community oriented, then it hasn't given results in our country. So the community-based enterprise systems. I agree with what Mr. Kashyap said about town-village enterprise systems. But a town-village enterprise system should probably have a feeder in a community enterprise system which will feed into this particular thing, in which case our supply chains become extremely robust and each one becomes the marketing, gives them the demand for producing more. And since we are starting with a kind of a clean slate, zero, the economy has probably come to whatever, it can't go lower than this. This is a great time. The agriculture, whatever policies changes, can you believe it? When I was director of agricultural marketing in the year 2000, I was talking about contract farming. I was talking about repealing the APMC Act. So 20 years it has taken to do this. And agriculture is a state subject. So I really do not know in India, anyway, the operationalization and implementation has always been a problem. But I hope they settle down, because this is the only time center completely and link them to micro and small enterprises. Agro-processing. Agro-processing is, I think, one thing which can be done by the women self-help groups very easily. And if you can give them packaging, that will actually add to your export basket. Because I was telling the other day that our export will also undergo a change the basket, because people abroad will reduce their non-essential or non-discretionary spends, because the discretionary spend, non-essential spend, they'll reduce simply because of the fact that their economy is also ensemble. So you couldn't be doing more of those perfumes and all that. It will be knowledge-based things. It will be agro-processing kind of a things. So I have a feeling we have been always talking about skill, giving the skill. But what is the demand? We have to link it to that. That particular thing is not happening. We are not able to tell our farmers. We are not able to tell our MSME sector on this particular aspect that this is what is the requirement. This is where the possible areas of innovation. These are the possible areas where you could explore. All that we are saying that these are the skills that are available. You choose it, you take it. We are actually not hand-holding them as much as we should do. As if we really want, then our knowledge that we are having has to be imparted to them in some manner, which is probably not happening in in an integrated manner that I would like. I will end with this. And I'll wait for the questions to come. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. These are very incisive insights. And I think you brought out the point very well that it's a very complex subject. We haven't applied our minds to it in the past because they were the silent, unknown people. It's only now when this massive migration has happened that we've woken up to the idea that there are migrant workers who behave and live like this. So obviously this is not the forum to find the answers because it's going to be a complex thing. And as I said, we'll have to have a macro vision for the migrant labor, that how do we really benefit them. So as usual, as always, you've got some very pertinent points, and we made a note of it. So there are a number of questions also that have come. So I think as we go along, after all the speakers have finished their presentation, then we'll take up some questions. And of course, we will continue to pick your brains as we go along, over the next few months. Okay, so yeah. Can you hear me? Because my screen went blank.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, yeah. So thank you very much, Dr. Amar Patnaik. We'll get back to you.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
Yeah,
It's a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
We must
May I
work
now-
together. My
Yes.
heart is there in agriculture, in the rural economy, even though I'm studied in Delhi.
Yeah. MART is going to be right behind you.
Thank you.
I mean, Ramesh is always, for his morning walks, he comes back from his walk, he calls me up and he says, today we discussed this. So he
We
really
picked up
become
each
your
other's brain,
disciple.
actually.
Okay.
Thanks.
So it's my pleasure now to invite Mr. Sanjay Panigrahi. Sanjay and I have known each other for many years, and I can tell you he has impeccable credentials. He's from the first batch of IRMA, and he started his career with Amul and went on to become the general manager, and then went on to join Sri Sehaj. They had these common service centers, which was the Government of India concept. So he started and ran some 30,000 common service centers. And he has spent his entire career of almost 40 years in the FMCG sector. And most of it, I would say almost all of it, in the rural sector. So over to you, Sanjay, for your observations about how the FMCG sector will respond to this crisis. Will it be an opportunity or otherwise?
Thanks a lot. I will just put my discussion into 4 modes. One is that you had asked me about the migrant population going back to their source states. What kind of meaning it has to the demand generation there, and how prepared are the companies to fulfill that? That's what's first question. Then we'll talk about the general impact of COVID in rural market. So I will talk from the rural market from the point of view of consumption, and demand part already you have discussed it here, and this is with or without migration. And lastly, what are some evolving themes that COVID might bring in as far as the rural markets are concerned? So before this, I would only say I will agree with to what Pradeep you had said, was that it is a very defining moment for rural. And and it is not done by government, it is done by nature. Nature has bestowed it, and whether out of fear or out of love, somewhere in the way of our development, we had possibly not been giving as much attention that one would like to give to this part. In fact, yesterday there was the CII's 125th conference in which I was participating, and I was listening to many well-known industry leaders, and they were speaking the 2 themes which were coming up and they were really concerned about. And we are all getting into what are the solution. One was food supply chain, and the other one was health. So at the end of the day, we come down to very basics. That is, where does the food get produced? How does it travel? How does it get? And number 2 is about the health. So having said that, in the first, rural plays a very significant role across the world, and more so in India, where we have still 6 lakh people remaining in villages, and a significant part of the rural population is involved in agriculture. Now, having said that, whether the advanced economies or the advanced urban towns, cities, are we looking at the fragility of the systems there, fragility of their systems there, and are the investors going to look elsewhere? That's the first question I will leave with you. And the second part is the quality of life. The migrant labor we are talking about, or the poor, urban poor we are talking about, are they also been exposed to a question that the quality of life that they lead in urban areas? And when they go back to their villages, will they be more comfortable earning little less, but spending a better quality life, rather than be in cluttering mega towns and mega cities? And these are two questions I will leave it to you. And the last part is that I would go one step further, Pradeep. Instead of saying, possibly saying smart towns or smart feeder markets, I will still say, are we talking about smart villages? I remember some time back, not so long back, and the president, our president of India, he once talked about a concept called PURA, providing urban amenities in rural areas. So this was also on the same thoughts. And are we looking at again the Gandhian way of economy or some hybrid way? These are some thoughts, initial thoughts. I will leave it with you. And this is for all of us to think about as far as rural economy is concerned, and hence rural market is concerned. So now let's come back to the main point for which you had asked me to share my thoughts. First is that migrant population, when they come back, what happens to the village demand? Now, from your data point, you had 2.9 crores of people that you estimated have come back. So having said that, we already have about 14 crores people. 9 crore are intrastate and 5 crores are interstate. So 2.9 is only about, it's not very high. It's not very high. So I think there's still a large part of migrant population still left back. That's one thing I would like to think about. And number two is that, what is the new normal? In that entire migration behavior, one new normal possibly could be that the intrastate migration will become will become more and more than interstate. In fact, if you look at the intrastate versus interstate in the total migration, this has been coming down. Interstate has been coming down. People having traveling lesser distances. So will this expedite that? So which would mean also a challenges for states like Punjab, Haryana, Andhra Pradesh, who had a lot of labor coming from more than 1,000 kilometers to serve during harvesting. What are the opportunities for them? So that's one part. So now when this labor has come back, one thing it has impacted drastically is the urban to rural remittances. India has almost 2 lakh crores which comes, out of which 80% comes to 2 states, which is Bihar and UP. Now, having said that, this kind of money which they were sending to home, in which you have said it was about 11,000 rupees per month and on average, if that money does not come, then what are the kind of activities this migrant population do when they are in their source states? And you had said also in your report that about 56% them are unskilled, 25% are factory workers, and 19% farm labor. Assume this farm labor will come and the farm labor prices in their source states will decrease. But this other 56%, the questions are what they will do, because only if the income will the consumption go up. So there are many things, as Mr. Patnaik rightly said. Government has many schemes, and this is on a way forward. But I would here, recollect one of the things that my friend Sodi, who is the MD of Amul, he has said that 15,000 crore the government has given towards dairy. So he had said that in 15,000 crore, you will be able to create livelihood for 30 lakh people, and about 5,000 rural jobs, and about 1,000 permanent rural jobs, and 1,000 in supply chain. So now, instead of giving money back for consumption, which NREGA does, or even DBT transfer does in many social sector schemes, can we think of large scale ready cash kind of livelihoods? Poultry is one, dairy is one. In fact, dairy CAGR has been 14% when India GDP is at 4 to 5%. So these are some huge opportunities which, if looked at well, can provide long-term employment to people at their home, at their villages, rather than going elsewhere. Now, changing consumers find it very, very difficult. I feel, Pradeep, to change behavior, and you know that better than anyone else. They, I think, will be continue to spend on the brands that are close to that they are used to, and which are their part of their lives. Just because they have gone back from Delhi to Bihar, will they change the toothpaste brand X or edible oil brand X to Y? I don't think so. They will not change. What has happened, and the many narratives that we see today, is all because of supply chain disruption. because the major brands were not available, their production has stopped, they were in red zones. That is why a lot of local brands from the stock that they had in the nearby market might have come, and that is, I produce some kind of narrative in the paper saying that local brands are having a heyday, but I don't think it is going to do. Any recession, any books on recession you will read, you will always find that whenever recession takes place, people cling to trust and loyalty. They cling to safety. They do not, even if they have less money, they may go to smaller packs. If someone guy is buying a 40-gram unit, he may go to 20 gram. But for the same brand, he is not going to switch brand because he is more concerned about the price, the value that he gets. And he has been using that for a very long period of time. So in the staples, in the food, in packaged food, I don't think that there will be a shift of demand. Overall demand is not going to grow. So for us to say that rural is going to grow by 3x, 4x, it is 3x because the urban is not growing. A part of the rural demand which is to come from urban area, that has got pushed to rural. Whether inorganic growth will be there in rural, I doubt. If people come back to their urban markets and urban markets have their growth, we may come back to a slightly different kind of equation, but it will not. Yes, having said that, if brands who do not have a very strong supply chain, or who because of their unavailability, the consumers go and adopt some other brands, whether they will continue with that brands, yes, a part will continue. So it is a challenge as well as it is a great opportunity for the large brands or the big brands to consolidate their positions here. I see two trends as far as companies are concerned. They are consolidating SKUs. If under one brand you have 3 brands of biscuits, one is 10 ka pack tha, 20 ka pack tha, 30 ka pack tha. So they are consolidating to something about 20. And they are not making 30 because they have limited capacity, they have limited labor, etc. So there is a lot of consolidation of the SKUs. This is one part which is taking place. The second part which is taking place is that the brands these people in the migrant labor used to consume in their destination states, are they available in the source states? So suppose I was using X brand of a food item in Delhi, and I have gone back to Bihar, I will search for that brand. So many of the companies have realized this, and I heard it from the horse's mouth. They said that we are trying to make our supply chain very strong in rural Bihar and rural UP, because I found that there is a demand from that, and the shopkeepers are asking for it. And so that's another thing which is taking place. Then last point is that the point which Mr. Patnaik said about the migrant labor, I think that high time has come that we look at the labor from the migrant labor as a community, and the government takes up certain things. I think 2017 there was a white paper on reorganization and providing security to migrant labor. That needs definitely a rethought and relook at. And something like a Aragya Setu app that you have for people. Can you have some app for the migrant labor? This will help. Technology will help a lot in this. So this is my take on the migrant labor part. The second part I would come down to is what happens to the rural market when post-COVID. Migrant labor is only a part of it. So I think that availability of labor, capacity to produce, profitability concerned, supply chain, these were all factors in the first phase of lockdown. But as times have progressed, I think things will come back to normal. We are already at 70% production as far as FMCG is concerned. Most of the industry is at 70%. So we'll get into 90-100% of this. But at the same time, I just told you earlier, there will be some shift of one point downwards. For example, if you were at a particular price point, you may come down to a lower price point on the same brand. That's one thing that might take place. Second is the consolidation of SKUs, which I already had discussed about. About the categories, I think this entire Corona thing is fear-led and not led by any design. So when it is fear-led, I think products which are in health hygiene or adjacent to health hygiene, they will have a great upsurge, and there may be inorganic growth there. People who are not using, let us say, antiseptic, people who are not using soap, which was 99% free, has people free from germs, they may switch to that. That may be adoption of those new customers as well as more occasion of use. That is one thing may happen. Local brands, I don't think so that local brands or regional players will have a lot of. In fact, I will see that local brands and regional brands will not be able to fight it out, because unless they were earlier also very strong, they are normally operate on a very high trade margin. Today, the matter is of supply chain and not of trade margin. Retailers are saying that humko maal chahiye. Please give us stocks and don't talk about what schemes you have got. So they lose out on that front. There is one sector which had got a tremendous impact, and a downward impact was the cold drinks or aerated soft drinks. And in the rural, the glass bottles are a very large segment. Repeat use jis product ka hota hai, customers which are going to go away. They are going to go to one time use kind of a PET bottle kind of a thing. So and cold drinks, because of some fear led to that, this is wo gale ko kharab karta hai. Ice cream, cold drinks have got a huge hit in their summer months, which was about peak season. Juices, and again in the health category, they may go up, and it depends on those prosperous rural states and non-prosperous rural states, and one can continue on that. As far as FMCD is concerned, I think there is going to be postponement of purchase of semi-automatic washing machines or single-door fridges, which are most common in rural areas, high track sales. There could be a postponement. Harvesting has been pretty good this time, and I was talking to my friends in the agriculture. They were saying that government almost has procured as much they were procuring during the same phase when there was no COVID, and supply chain has been better and better. So farmers are going to get the money, but they're going to be cautious. So even if they were to, because the fear which has come so much, I don't think they are going to spend on any new addition of FMCD in the next 6 to 9 months, till the time the supply chain becomes. Only 1 or 2 products that may see some amount of more adoption. One is mobile phones in the sub 15K category, and some traction of laptops, because people are becoming more and more digital. Pradeep, you know that I was always demanding that when adoption of technology will take place in rural. 2 things. One is demonetization, and second is COVID. I think we have seen a change in the rural, which is a boon in terms of the digital penetration. Adoption has been huge. I recently was talking to my dealers, 10 of them in UP, 5 of them in Bihar, and another 10 in Rajasthan, all together on one screen, and they were on their mobile phone. I couldn't believe it, and they were in 3,000 population village. And they said, sir, hum karte hain na, baatcheet karte hain, WhatsApp mein baatcheet karte hain. So this thing, is it not for entertainment only? They have started learning to give orders on WhatsApp. They are slowly getting convinced, because of contactless selling, that can I send money by money transfer rather than giving a check. All these behavioral changes are going to take place as far as the rural supply chain is concerned. And two-wheelers is a category which might see some amount of upsurge because of personal mobility. The fear of traveling in a bus, the fear of traveling in train, will there be a surge? I would presume there would be. So having said that, I will end by saying what are some evolving things. In-home consumption will be up. Out-home consumption will be raised. So rural hotels, rural small-town eateries may see some amount of setback. Number 1. Huge digital adoption, we have talked about. Yeah, and the products and another thing which will take place is that the products which are slightly make you little independent. It is urban as well as rural. Mobile phone, personal two-wheelers, these kind of products where you are not going and mixing with community. Rural is a highly community-centric culture. So what happens in COVID is $1 million question. There will be social gatherings will stay, but I think the impact will be there in terms of that. The fact that people was in home, even in the rural areas, Ramayana, Mahabharata, there is a feeling of a social bonding and things like that. But there will be some amount of impact, I would presume. Last point is that whenever fear comes of this nature, there is a lot of products and services which we call our escapist products, escapism. I think putting it Ramayana and Mahabharata on the TV screen, or people watching movies is kind of escapism of avoiding to think about fear. Some of these products, which are in this particular domain, with the TV or indoor games or these kind of services, may see some amount of upsurge. At the end only, I will say that the early adoption after the COVID impact becomes less and less could be food. Beyond food, it could be things like I'm afraid, but cigarettes, alcohols. We have seen what happens. This will move faster. You know, the late adoption could be people going on tirth. जाते थे जो बद्रीनाथ जाते थे वो बहुत late adoption होगा. Eating out will be late adoption. Making new homes, you know, an impact on cement. Making new homes, making new infra, except for government projects, etc. That will be delayed. And one basic feature which you talked about China also, I think people have got a scare. They're scared that there are going to be job losses, there may not be enough opportunities. So people will try to work harder. This is not something happened because of a wrong policy at the state or the government level. It is induced by nature. So there will be a lot of changes in terms of the culture of people in work culture and things like that. For example, you know, companies may not like to send their people to rural areas, but people will still work hard by using video calling, etc. It is possible, and people are doing that also. So contactless selling, contactless customer relationship management are going to stay here for rural, which was very much something which we always used to doubt. But COVID has forced the the companies and the rural users, the rural dealers, the rural supply chain, the transporters, all that it is possible to work in a contactless manner and even pass the same information which was required rather than going physically. One last point was that the role of the wholesaler, very, very important as far as rural marketing concerned. This will work two ways. The people were going to buy from the wholesalers, but they stopped going because they were afraid that the wholesalers are in the semi-urban or urban market. They will not go. So companies have started feeling the demand of their products for the retailers directly has increased. Those retailers which used to go there. This is number one. So direct selling by the companies, this is a huge opportunity for them to scale it up. Second, many of these wholesalers used to get disconnected from the company. They used to go to major markets and pick up their stocks from there because of discounting. These people now are being, they could not go. Like someone from Nasik could possibly come to Mumbai to pick up something. Now he could not come. So now what is happening is that he is getting connected to the network in Nasik of the company, which the company very much wanted earlier, and saying that let's talk. So that is getting a new kind of alliance between the wholesalers and the company, which is becoming stronger and stronger. Will this make the rural supply chain strong? The question we always used to ask: how much direct distribution you have got? How efficient is your supply chain? I think very much yes. Very much with the use of technology and the intention of the company with what COVID has taught us. I think it's a very positive sign, and I am very, very hopeful that as I told you, it's a defining moment for rural. How much you will be able to retain it, and how much the organized sector will be able to retain it is all about our efforts. Last point is that government has some roles to play. I think 80% of the role of the government, if I were in position, will be supply chain. Even today, I hear the drivers are not getting passes. There is one advisory from the state, there is another advisory from the district, there is another advisory from the town, there is another advisory from the center. So when your trucks move carrying goods from X to Y, which advisory there? So we have challenges there. What can be done about it? And the faster you make that, the earlier benefits you will get. That is the first point. Second is that the MSP or the minimum support price, can we stabilize that? And because normally the market price after the essential commodity is abolished, and normally we have seen that the actual price rating in the market is near about in most communities to the MSP. So government defines the price actually. What can be done in there? Is there an opportunity? Number one. And number two, the prices to the farmers which you pay. Normally MSP का जो पैसा थोड़ा लेट आता है, वो उसमें government कुछ कर सकती है क्या because of the need. So if the money comes back to agriculture or the farmers into their hand from the sales of their harvest, I think that's a huge thing for the rural consumption, and that will really make the entire thing very strong. So these are few points which were coming to my mind. I thought I would say.
Thank you very much, Sanjay. As usual, your knowledge is very grounded. It comes from level 0 and not 33,000 feet above. So thank you very much. We'll now have the last speaker. I just want to make a point here that the session should have completed at 12:15, so by now our session should have been over. But हम सब लोग हिंदुस्तानी हैं, so we do take our time. So I'm now going to request.
Kashyap, I'll have to leave. Please allow me to leave because there's
Oh,
something
okay,
important
okay.
which has to come up.
So
I'll hear the record. I'll get the recording and maybe
yeah, we'll send you the recording, and we'll keep this dialogue going. This is only the beginning of the dialogue.
Thank you.
Huh?
Thank you.
Thank you very much for being a part of this.
Thank you.
And I hope at some stage you will take all these issues to the Rajya Sabha also.
Very interesting.
Because
Very,
this
very
is a
keen.
very
keen.
critical, thing for us.
Yes, I'm very keen. I'm very keen. In fact, I think we should have a separate committee now. We don't have a committee to look after this. After this thing, we should actually have a committee because you see, this is a multidisciplinary, kind of a ministry kind of a work which is required. If you put it under the Ministry of let's say construction workers, under urban development, or under the highways or something, it doesn't really address their agriculture.
Get lost. We have to have a separate ministry in the long term, and we have to ensure that.
Mr. Kashyap, if you would be very keen, in fact, we can write on this together, both of us, on this particular aspect, the separate ministry as well as having an interdisciplinary team, because parliamentary committee should be there, I think, because this wants an integrated plan to redress their issues.
Sir, your mic is on mute. Would you?
But
yeah.
Okay, so Rakesh. So Mr. Rakesh Gupta is currently the strategy head of JK Lakshmi Cement. He has more than 30 years of experience. He is an engineer from BITS Pilani, and he's done his MBA from XLRI. So, Rakesh, I'll have to request you to try and be a little brief, because we would want the last 10 or 15 minutes for a couple of critical questions. Right? So, over to you.
Yeah, Pradeep, thanks a lot. And I will try to be brief, and I would just use a small presentation to make my point. So if you allow me, then I will just share my screen. Pradeep, you are on mute, so I can't hear you. Pradeep, you are on mute.
A minute, I keep unmuting and it keeps going back to mute. Yeah.
So I will just share my screen. I have a small presentation that I would like to use to make my point. If you allow me, then I can share my screen.
Yeah, as I said, I mean, this is your decision, but we want you to try and finish your total presentation in 10 minutes.
I'll try to do it in less than 10 minutes. So
yeah.
So we have more time for questions and answers.
Thank you very much.
So let me first begin with the complimenting Pankaj for a very, very insightful presentation that he has done on the reverse migration. And in fact, many of the views that what Pankaj has presented, just a minute. They echo the kind of thing that what we have been seeing and what we have been observing on the ground. And in fact, my team, which works deep rural in Rajasthan, has also spoken to many of the migrant labor over there who have come back to their native places as to what is really playing on their mind. And I mean, though we may have spoken to a very small section of the society, but I mean, there is not much of difference between what Pankaj has presented and what we have seen and we have felt on ground. But still, the migration is reverse migration. It is still a very, very evolving story, and it will depend upon, how many waves of COVID infection that we would see. But one of the very, very significant and important thing what we have seen and what we have observed in last few months, and especially after the lockdown was partially lifted on 20th of April, is that there is a sudden upsurge in rural demand. Now, when we talk about rural, we talk about especially the places, which are at panchayat level or below panchayat level. And in some cases, in some markets, we have seen that the cement demand, especially the construction-related sector, demand for construction-related products, has gone up by as much as 100% from the normal demand what we used to see in those markets before the lockdown was announced. Now, is it really a one-time change, or it is a pointer towards some long-term structural changes? Now, even before COVID, we were experiencing these kind of changes which were taking place in the market, and I would just like to show you a few things. If you really look at it, construction sector is a very, very big sector in terms of employment. I think it probably is the biggest employment provider after agriculture.
It
and
is.
and if you really look at it in your presentation also, you have brought out that 50% of the migrant workforce is somehow or another is linked to construction sector. Now, rural construction has always been, at least for last 7-8 years, has been always been growing at a much faster pace than the construction which was taking place in urban sector. So the demand growth in rural is not really a new phenomena what we have recently observed, but it has been building up since many number of years. I mean, primarily due to a variety of housing schemes, Narega, rural incomes going up, and all that. So we have been observing this thing for quite some time, and if you really look at it, I mean, construction, housing is one of the major sector, and infrastructure is another sector. 40% of demand is basically influenced by the government control or government aided funding. Now, what we see even in terms of the stimulus package that has been announced, the major portion is going towards revival of rural economy and MSME sector. So to that extent, I mean, one would see that it would be a continuation of the trend that what we have been seeing for last so many years, where rural construction has been rising at much faster rate. Now, what happens is that the labor was always not a short supply as far as the rural construction is concerned. Now, with the lot of people who were earlier employed in construction sector, in urban sectors having returned back to rural, actually would lead to more amount of construction in that particular thing, because some amount of skilled labor which was not available in rural is now available. And what we see, and when we talk to the consumers over there, what they say is that they would like to complete their construction work as early as possible. So this is one of the major change that what we are witnessing. I would skip these slides, but one of the major thing again what we have seen in last few years is that the majority of the construction, whether it is urban or whether it is rural, is more towards happening small, incremental, and additional construction on the existing units rather than building of the new unit. So this is again one of the structural change that that has been taking place, and it has been building up for quite some time. I mean, if you really look at it, nearly about 80% of the construction sites, or 70% or 80% of the construction sites, whether it is urban or rural, are the construction sites which are already there. They are not new. So the construction is happening either way of some additional floor is being added to that, or some repair or alterations are happening to that. Now, it would have a huge implication in terms of the way things will play out in the future. Some of the things, my thoughts on post-COVID challenges and impact. we have talked about decongestion, we have talked about deurbanization, we have talked about localization. So, I mean, in your presentation, Pankaj, you have talked about, and Pradeep, you have also spoken to, town and village enterprise. Now, this skilled labor which has gone back to the villages is an opportunity in a big way for the small towns and villages to come up and develop rural enterprise, and especially when a lot of government support and the policymaker support is available to them. uh, I mean, till now, let us say that industry has attracted skills from the villages. Now, one could always see a trend of industry moving to the places where skills are available. So, one of yeah, did you say, Pradeep, anything?
No, you go ahead.
Yeah. So one of the thing which can probably happen is that instead of skills moving to where the industry is, small and medium enterprises can move. So let us say, for example, we have a lot of gem, stone cutting and stone polishing industry, which is there in Gujarat, which is there in Surat, which attracts a lot of migrant labor from Odisha or Bengal or other places. Now, these are small units. So one can probably, I mean, it all depends upon how many number of waves of migration and reverse migration we are going to see. But one long-term trend possibly could be this thing that instead of skills moving to the industry will move where the skill is, and especially in those sectors where the value addition by way of skill is significantly high. Now, that would mean that lot of decongestion is going to take place, lot of deurbanization is going to take place, lot of localization is going to take place, the local incomes will go up, the local construction will go up. Now, let us say that if there are 25 million people, if they have gone back to their villages, they will have additional need in terms of housing. They would have additional need for multiple number of products and services if the job opportunities are created, and they happen over there. So these are some of the things I think that policymakers need to think and take those into consideration. Uh, uh, I mean, when we look at thinking that what should be our response, long-term response to the crisis or the magnitude of the problem that we have not seen since independence. Coming back to the construction sector specifically, now there are 4 pointers that I would like to say. One is in terms of construction practices. Now, as we have seen this thing that migrant labor form nearly about 40% or 50% of the construction workforce. And if the labor shortage is going to be there, especially in the urban area, then maybe probably that is the time for adoption of construction practices and adopting the products and methods which are less labor intensive and more driven by the technologies. Maybe probably one has to look at the policy level changes, the policy by which the labor is hired, the way the labor is treated, all those things may have to go through some changes. The business priorities may probably have to be redefined. Now, in one of the seminar which was recently organized by CII or NARDECO, I mean, many of the builders or many of the contractors and all are talking about not constraint on the demand side, but not constraint on the supply side, but rather on demand side. That the demand is going to go down. Now, they will have to really revisit their priorities. They will have to really see this thing that instead of taking few number of big jobs, would they be more keen to take up more number of smaller jobs? they will have to revisit their business models and all those things. I would like to sum up by saying that uh, rural or the reverse migration definitely has the potential to bring about some structural changes in our overall economic model. And your suggestion in terms of the developing town and village enterprises, I think is quite relevant in these changing times. uh, the focus on developing few smart cities versus the focus on developing smart towns or smart villages, I think probably can provide a long-term sustainable solution to the kind of crisis that we are currently dealing with. So over to you, Pradeep.
Mr. Rakesh, you may have to.
Thank you very much
start the
for
sharing.
making your presentation well within time. Uh, okay, so we are already, coming to the close of this session. What I can request is perhaps each panelist to answer just one question each. So I'll start with Pankaj. Where are you, Pankaj? I can't see you.
Sir.
Yeah. So Pankaj, many people have asked about the study design and the methodology.
Yeah.
So what they want to know is what was the total sample size, which were the different areas you've covered, right? And was it a quantitative, qualitative approach? Now you have to give your answer in just 4 lines, which means less than half a minute.
Yeah, so I think as mentioned in the deck also that we have met 200 migrant workers across 4 states, UP, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh and Odisha. So these are the 4 states covered with equal number of sample from each of those states. And we have taken this, access the data of these migrants who have gone back and interviewed them telephonically for this survey, and quantitative sampling and analysis was done for the purpose.
Okay, and these 4 states you selected because they are the corridors for supplying.
Yeah, they are the migration
labor.
corridors because the 50% migration almost happens from these states.
Okay.
So that was the prime reason.
Right. Thank you very much. There is a question for Sanjay Panigrahi that will the rural demand grow faster than urban? Not only this year, but in the coming year, or in the next year also. So what is your own bhavishyavani about rural demand? Because we know that rural has been driving the market for several years, where the growth of rural has been far higher than urban. So what do you see over the next
so normally in most product category, at least FMCG, the golden rule is 1.25 to 2, depending on categories. Of the urban demand is the rural growth. But having said that, COVID, I don't think is going to, except for the health and hygiene category and some categories like personal mobility or which gives you independence, the themes that I talked about, there is going to be any inorganic growth in rural. Currently what we are seeing is a shift of urban demand to rural areas. Either people are going and buying from there, they have stopped buying, or so this is a very temporary phenomena. And once urban stabilizes, rural will come back to the same 1.25 or 1.5, except for the categories which I talked about. I think a huge scale up in adoption will be of health and hygiene products.
Yeah.
In that they will grow.
Okay, because the government and industry is hoping that rural demand will pick up quickly, because our GDP is sliding, deep down into the dungeons. So the only thing that can now revive the economy is some hope from rural demand. So you made your point. And the last question is to Rakesh. Rakesh, you very rightly said that construction is the second largest employer after agriculture. And if you remember, in the 2008-2009 crisis, what saved this country was the growth in the construction sector. At that time, 11%
Pradeep, your voice, Pradeep, your voice was cracking. So if you could repeat.
Yeah. So what I was saying is, can you hear me now?
It's okay now. Yeah.
Yeah. During the 2008-2009 global meltdown, the one thing that saved India was a rise in construction, right? And at that time, 11% of India's workforce was engaged in construction. Today, that 11% has come down to 8%. But the point you made
No,
is that
Pradeep, again, you're not audible. You're not audible, Pradeep.
oh God, okay. I don't know why, but one minute. Can you hear me now better?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so what I'm saying is that what are the reasons you have to say that rural demand for construction will go up?
Uh, Pradeep, see, there are, see, what happened was that housing is one of the major sector, which is roughly about 60% or 70% of construction. And in terms of housing, there is more of a unmet rural need as compared to urban is. Uh, there are multiple number of, NSSO led researches and all that, which point out to that the number of kacha houses in rural is far more greater as compared to number of kacha houses which are there in urban India. And if you really look at it, even since independence, the major driver of the construction in housing is not the new construction, but it is, we have looked at the data for last 60 years, 70 years, and it is more, demand is more driven by the journey from kacha to pakka. Now, this kacha to pakka journey has taken place quite substantially in last 15 to 20 years. And urban markets are nearly now close to peak kind of thing, but where there is still a lot of ground to be covered as far as the rural is concerned. And this Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana or Indra Awas Yojana earlier, or lot of variety of the housing initiatives. So this is one thing, and second thing is that even we have been talking to a lot of the rural population over there and all that. And in fact, before COVID, we were working on an initiative which was driven towards rural developing the uh, rural enterprise, driven by the local youth, and we got a lot of good response from that. Now, by and large, the COVID has come now, but overall general behavior now is that people prefer to live closer to their homes. So if they are able to get their jobs or their livelihoods and all that, then they would prefer to live close with their family, close to their home, then go for migration. Now, these are some of the reasons that why we would believe that the rural construction will rise much faster pace as compared to the urban construction. I hope it
Okay.
answers your
Yeah,
question.
right. Thank you very much, Rakesh. Now, we come to the close of this session. I would first like to thank all our four panelists for making some very thought-provoking presentations. Because what we have to remember is that there is just no information about migrants, and therefore this is the first attempt that we are trying to get some information, and the panelists have added immensely to this process. What I also want to announce is that we will be sharing the report which Pankaj has presented with all the participants. What I also want to say is that there is a lot of enthusiastic response from all of you. We've got a very large number of questions and chats. So we will try and make some sense out of it and see if we can share something out of this also. See, what we have to remember is that we will have to create the knowledge together. This is the first attempt. And now, as Dr. Amar Patnaik, the MP from Rajya Sabha, also said that the Rajya Sabha is thinking in terms of putting together a committee on migrant labor. There is also talk about having a separate ministry, something that I've been talking for several months now. So therefore, we don't have all the answers. There are a number of questions saying, what is the breakup of this? What is the age profile of different people? Will they actually stay back? Hundreds of such questions. And I'll be honest that nobody has all the answers. This is only the beginning of the search. And as we go along, we'll become wiser and we'll come out with better solutions. And hopefully, we'll be able to serve the cause of the migrants. So thank you very much, all of you, once again, for participating in this so enthusiastically, for asking all your questions, and to the panelists for doing a great job. Jai Hind.
Thank you so much. Right now, the webinar has come to an end. We all can start leaving, and we'll see you soon with the next announcement of the webinar. Thank you so much, and stay safe, everybody.